Two raiders plumb the depths of their experience to make sense of a world gone completely insane. Subscribe for the word. Like and leave a comment. Stranger by the Hour.
Welcome back, Stranger by the Hour, everybody. It's going to be episode 115 coming at you December 13th, 2023 is the timestamp. And we got another awesome guest for you. Tonight, we're going to be talking to Brad Miller, man. And Brad's got a super interesting story about his interactions with the Army and dealing with the pandemic, man. So we're just going to kick right into it. Welcome, Brad. And, if the folks... Actually, you know what? Let's start just by getting you to kind of tell the folks at home real quick around the world about, sort of like just where you were born, kind of real quick, and I guess like a tight paragraph right up to like Lieutenant Colonel, and then we'll just kick it from there.
Yeah. Hey, first of all, thanks for having me on. Happy to be here. Hoping to have an interesting conversation with you guys. But yeah, tight paragraph from birth to Lieutenant Colonel. So I grew up in North Carolina in a small town not too far away from Charlotte. Still consider myself a North Carolinian, even though I have not lived in the state in over a quarter of a century. Went to school at West Point, the military academy, graduated in 2003, and served for what ended up being a little over 19 years of active duty. So in 2021, August of 2021 to be exact, when DOD implemented the COVID vax mandate, I was a battalion commander. So I was a lieutenant colonel. My position at the time was that I was a battalion commander in the 101st Airborne Division. So, I mentioned that just because a lot of people are at least familiar, perhaps with the history of the 101st Airborne Division. It does have a very remarkable history. So that's kind of where I ended my career. So what happened? So I was a battalion commander at the time the mandate went into effect. There was never a chance ever at any time that I was going to take the shot. I did not. So for my refusal to comply, I was relieved of command. I was one of only two active duty battalion commanders throughout the entire active Army that refused and was relieved of command. So I'm proud to say I was one of two. And then a couple of months later, once I realized that DOD was not gonna walk this back, I said, you know what? I mean, I know I'm at close to 19 years or whatever, post 19 years by the time I actually got out. But I just said, I don't like where this is going. I believe that this organization is willfully violating the Constitution, wantonly breaking the law. And I feel like I've been backed into a corner where I have to choose between the country and the military. And I don't believe anybody should ever be in that situation, but I believe that many of us were. I chose the country. I think that's the only decision you can make in a situation like that. And so even though it may seem strange to a lot of people, I took the uniform off and I felt like, you know what, I can probably do more at this juncture where we are, with things the way they are. I said, you know what, I can probably do more to serve the country out of uniform than in uniform. And so that was a little over a year ago. My last day in the Army was September 15th, 2022. So about 15 months ago.
Yeah, we're going to have a million questions about all that, but just so for our people that aren't super familiar with the military and the structure and all that stuff, and you're humble and modest, but like just so people understand, like and a lot of people know this, but some people don't. Like it's a very difficult, it's an exclusive thing to get into the military academy at West Point. Very competitive. So I'm sure there's a whole bunch of stuff you had to do as a teenager to prepare yourself for that, or to be even competitive for entry into that school. And then once you get in there, the academics and the lifestyle there are very rigorous. It's a big deal to have gone to and graduated from the West Point. And the people that they send to West Point, the military is very big and there's all kinds of people in it. But, a West Point graduate battalion commander at the 101st Airborne is not, it's not one of the dime a dozen military rules. And then the 101st Airborne, like you said, it's one of the famed, units in our military, famous for a lot of things in World War II and everything. But, even contemporarily, like now, it's still, a premier light infantry unit. The airborne's kind of a misnomer because it's an air assault unit.
Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
That is
but
true. Yep, that's
in
true.
any case, the Army's got a bunch of ground combat units, and the 101st Airborne is one of the, aside from the special operations units, you've probably got like the 101st and the 82nd that are kind of above maybe the 173rd too or something. But you probably are too professional to like rack and stack the ground combat units. But the 101st Airborne is supposed to be one of the premier ones. So just wanted to kind of paint all that for the people that.
Well, in addition to that, to keep singing Brad's praises is
please continue. No problem.
To be selected for a battalion command is a big deal. Like it's a big deal in the Marine Corps. It's a big deal in the Army. It's one of those things. It's like a mafia. It's like becoming a made man. They're about to open the books up and they're about to give you command of a bunch of people, right? And real quick, I think it's probably a good idea if you're one of Brad's supporters and you just come over here because of Brad. So I joined the military in 1998, Marine Corps guy. I was an infantry guy first. Did that till around 2002-ish, 3-ish. Basically, I Latin moved to become an EOD guy, but I didn't go to school until after I invaded Iraq as an infantry guy. Graduated EOD school 2004 early. Went right back to Iraq for the Second Battle of Fallujah. That was my first EOD gig. 2006, I got selected to be in MARSOC with this guy. I stayed at MARSOC till 2016, started doing contracting work from 2016 to 2021. 2021, I walked away and bought a farm.
Yeah, and I did 20 years in the Marines. I was enlisted infantry guy. I was enlisted the whole time, but I was an infantry guy, and then got into Force Recon, and then in 2006 or 7, the Marine Corps stood up a component for SOCOM called MARSOC, and they took a bunch of the Force Recon guys. They had to kind of start it with something, so we helped stand the unit up, and that's where I stayed until I retired in 2016, and then immediately went to work as a contractor supporting SOCOM in various roles. So that's kind of, we know each other both from MARSOC, but also working together as a contractor. So
sure,
that's our whole little.
So I guess a good place to start is, everybody kind of like thinks back to that time frame when COVID popped up, and it's almost like if you were playing heads up ball, you were one of the weirdos. So maybe I think from my perspective, I'm interested in, how did you end up on the team that was anti-vax? How did you come to that standpoint?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I'll tell you, there are two ways that I would answer that question. One is, I was skeptical about the narrative that we were being told about COVID from day one. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I had it all figured out. I mean, I didn't, but I knew that we were being lied to. And I was actually in Asia when all this started because I was stationed in South Korea. So I was in South Korea from 2017 until the summer of 2020. So in, very, very early 2020, I remember when we were first starting to hear about this, and being over there in Asia. And the narrative originally was that, this originated in China. So South Koreans are already a little wary of China because they believe that a lot of pollution, originates in China and kind of floats over towards South Korea. There's probably some truth to that. So they're kind of already wary of what may or may not come out of China anyway. The USFK, the United States Forces Korea, which is like the entire command of all U.S. forces that are stationed in Korea, USFK. The command was also, kind of starting to freak out a little bit. Now, maybe that's, again, everybody was being lied to. So, whatever. This is very, very early 2020. And so I'm not here to tell you that I knew what was going on, but I just assumed that we were being lied to, So why did I think that? Well, this is kind of the second part of the story, and it starts much earlier. So I was a cadet on 9/11. I was in my third year at West Point. So I graduated from West Point in 2003. But obviously, I spent 4 years there. So I had just started my junior year at West Point in the fall of 2001. So we had just started the academic year, and 9/11 happened. So for me, the story with COVID and kind of the decisions that I made with COVID kind of start as far back as 9/11. And so very quickly, the abridged version of that story is I was as hoodwinked as anybody else with 9/11. I mean, I bought the story just like anybody. I mean, I'm at West
Us
Point,
too.
Yeah,
you
same.
know.
Yeah.
I mean, I am. For those who may not be super familiar with West Point, I mean, you were talking about one of the most, like one of the places that is just steeped in American history and mythology
Mm.
above almost any other place in the country. And when I say mythology, I mean that in the good sense. I don't mean necessarily like a fable that is untrue. There's plenty of stuff in American history that is that type of mythology, but I'm talking about, kind of the richness and stories of characters who almost are, larger than life. You know what I'm saying? But not necessarily in a way that's false. A lot of times we get,
It's like Americana. It's like
yeah. People get confused about, what myth can mean, but I'm there, right? And I'm kind of steeped in this history. And we all, I mean, West Point, just like probably the whole military, right? Um, changes from one day to the next because everything now is real. So yeah, I might be going to science class or whatever at West Point because the academic year, but we all know from one day to the next, we all know we're headed to war. And so for my class, the class of 2003, yeah, I mean, we had to go through 2 more years of school and graduate. But I mean, every one of my classmates from West Point, I mean, everybody deployed, I
Yeah.
mean, so everything that we were feeling turned out to be true. Everyone, deployed. I deployed to Afghanistan. So I went to Afghanistan as a lieutenant. And I went to Afghanistan still believe in the story. I
Yeah.
spent 12 months in Afghanistan, believed that I was over there fighting terrorists for God and country. And if this were a movie, there'd be some remarkable event that happened to me in Afghanistan that opened my eyes. That's not what
right.
happened to in real
Yeah.
life. I came home a year
Playing
later.
music and shit.
Yeah, right. I came home a year later just as convinced. But then in about 2007, I kind of started doing a lot of research, almost by happenstance. Started doing a lot of research into 9/11 that just never stopped. So
Yeah,
I was,
that'll get you.
Yeah, that will get you.
so for me, 9/11 was kind of the catalyst as to like, hey man, there's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff that we've been told that just ain't so. So then from 2007, and in fact, I almost got out of the army about 2009 because I was like, hey, I got nothing against the military as an institution, but like our government, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, here's the dirty little secret about being in the military. And you guys know this, right? But
Yep.
for those who are listening, just think about it this way. You're always told, you go in an airport, you get told by somebody, hey, thanks for your service. And people are very well intentioned when they say that. And that's great. I love that. I get it. But you got to understand, you're told in the military that you serve the country, but the dirty little secret is you serve the government. You
100%.
only
Correct.
serve the country in as much as the government serves the
Well,
country.
and even more kind of dark in serving the government, you're actually you're serving corporations, really.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
when you abstract it one more level, but yeah, okay.
So, like, if we lived in a functioning republic where our military and our government were what the average American kind of thinks that they are, what you're
Yeah.
told in middle school and high school, as to what they are, then it would make sense that by putting on the uniform and defending your country, or by putting on the uniform and being in the military, you are defending the country. But the reality is, it's just not quite like that. So,
Right.
so I was going to get out of the army in about 2009. Spoiler alert, I didn't.
Yeah.
So then, fast forward another decade. Now it's early 2020. I've almost been living in like not a double life, but I've almost been living for a decade of kind of this cognitive dissonance where I'm aware that there's like what I do at work,
Yeah.
kind of professionally, and then my beliefs kind of at home. And I reconciled that for a decade by telling myself, hey, the military still needs good people that like
Yeah.
understand the Constitution, that
The
are
troops,
morally grounded.
the troops need good leadership.
The
No
troops
matter
need
what.
good leadership. America needs to know that you got good people, that are wearing the uniform. So
Mhm.
then when COVID comes and throughout 2020, now people are starting to talk about a shot. And I'm like, you can't take this. Like that's
Yeah.
like clearly that's there are ulterior motives at play here. So there was never a chance that I was going to take the shots. And so part of if I were to state this very succinctly, part of the reason that I got out over the whole COVID vax mandate is because I did not get out a decade earlier with the whole 9/11 thing. Because the difference between then and, like, another 10 to 12 years of life experience and experience in the military, seeing where the country is, I just realized it's no more about, oh, the government needs good people. It's like, hey, listen, the military is actively being used to, like, perpetrate, malfeasance on the American public and to some degree the world. And so I
Yeah.
just, I'm not going to be a part of it.
Yeah, and it's admirable to walk away. It's maybe for people that aren't, even for people that are just there's because you can kind of casually be in the military for a little while and move on down the road, and it's not like my brother did 4 years, and it's not his life's work like it was mine, right? But when you have to confront, it was a little easier for us because we were out in contracting. I didn't have to make this hard choice of like, am I going to walk on my retirement or whatever, but in any case, like to walk away or to do what you did, you're having to, you talked about mythology, like you're having to like break your own personal mythology about like what it is you've been doing for 19 years, that's what you're confronting is like you described, but it's like, well, if I wasn't serving, the side of, righteousness and the good for the last 19 years, what was I doing?
Sure.
And
Sure.
so a lot of people, because it's okay. Like you can confront that. You can be like, hey, it's not my fault. I had the best of intentions. I entered into this thing really trying to serve. I did serve really, but a lot of people are not willing to confront that. Like I think that's one main level of the cognitive dissonance with the other military people. When you try to, and I'm sure you have a bunch of stories about trying to talk to your contemporaries about this, but it's like, as soon as you go down that road with a lot of these people, they're like, no, that's not what we are. That's not what this is. That's not what the government is. That's not what the country is. It's like they can't see it.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. And I tell people that I'm still proud to have gone to West Point. It was at a significant time in my life because, when you're a young adult, you're coming out of high school or whatever, whether you join the military or go to college or do whatever, right? But it's a significant formative period in your life. So I'm proud to have gone to West Point. I'm proud to have given 19 years to the Army. But I will tell you what I am most proud of out of all the accomplishments that I had, in the Army or whatever. I am most proud of the decision that I made to walk away because everything can be summed up in kind of that decision,
Yeah. So, was this something that you, I guess we'll get into this part. Like when you made that decision, how was that received by first your contemporaries on your level, like your friend, your peer group, your subordinates, and then the leadership above you?
Yeah. So, so first thing for people out there who might have this question. So I'm not married, so it's just me. So one thing that I think makes the decision just that much more difficult for other people is if I had a wife and or kids, right? Then perhaps it's a more complex decision because now there are other mouths that I got to worry about besides just my own, right? So let me first and foremost just say, hey, listen, at least whatever I decided to do, I just had to worry about me. Peers. So as a battalion commander in the Army, for those who might not be aware, the level of unit just above the battalion is the brigade. So in my brigade, there were 7 battalions. Each one had a battalion commander. I was one of those. I was a lieutenant colonel. The other battalion commanders were all lieutenant colonels. The brigade commander is a colonel. Above that is the division. In this case, the 101st Airborne Division. The division commander is a 2-star general, what we call a major general, but a 2-star general. So that makes the colonel and the major general my supervisors 1 level up and 2 levels up.
Mm-hmm.
So amongst my peer group, I mean, I'm sure they thought I was crazy. I mean, I'm sure they thought what made it weirder is as all of this is happening in the summer of 2021, right as I've taken command, is that there's a policy that if you are unvaxxed, you have to wear a mask, right? Which I did. Listen, I never agreed with the whole mask thing. I mean, I got it. But
Yeah, Marsoc had the same policy.
We wore the shit for
Yeah,
a year.
I wore like a fucking handkerchief you can see through.
Yeah, everything can't be a red line,
Right.
So for me, not taking the COVID vax was a red line that I was not going to cross. The mask was something I did not believe in. I thought it was ridiculous, but I mean, I did comply at least, mostly. So, but my point is that I'm wearing a mask. I'm a lieutenant colonel. I'm a battalion commander, and I'm like clearly not on the team, if you will.
That's a target indicator. Like, one of these battalion commanders is not like the others. Like
scarlet letter.
There you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So when I'm first meeting my peers,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm first meeting my peers, and to their credit, I mean, they're all good dudes, right? But I'm showing up. I'm wearing a mask. They're not. We're all taking command at the same time. Summer of 2021. This is June of 2021. 2 months before the mandate. And I remember one of them was like, "Hey man, what's up with the mask?" This is very early on. This is one of my peers, one of the other battalion commanders.
Did you know this dude before then?
I had met him. But I don't think they knew that I wasn't vaxxed, and now they're seeing me with a mask. So I mean, obviously they're putting 2 to 2 together. And so one of them's like, "What's up with the mask?" And I said, "Well, I mean, I haven't taken the shots." And he just kind of looks at me. Yeah, he just kind of looks at me like, and I said, I'm not gonna fucking take them,
Yeah.
And so he was a little bit taken aback by that. And but that was kind of the way that my peers reacted. So fast forward to the mandate comes out in August. In October, I get relieved of command. And to be honest, I have not really heard much from my peers since then. So these guys that I was only in command for 4.5 months, but I don't want to say that they kind of wrote me off, but I mean, it would appear that way. One of them did reach out to me a couple of times, and which I'm grateful for. That's cool. But I mean, these guys just, I don't know, maybe they thought that like, hey, I don't want to appear to be too close to this guy who's clearly off the reservation, So I don't know.
I can tell you from the experience.
What's that?
So I can tell you from the experience of being an officer who has been in trouble, because I was an officer who has been in trouble, that your typical careerist minded officers will immediately go the other way, because if you have something that is putting a stink on you, they think through like leprosy or some shit, it's going to rub off on them. Like if the brigade colonel sees them rubbing fucking elbows with you and being chummy and you're a malfunctioning cog, then the brigade colonel is going to be like,
yep,
oh, Brad's little boy over there is probably the next malfunctioning cog, So like that, they're fucking scummy in my opinion, but that's how it is.
It is, but it is, that is unfortunately that's a reality. So, in my battalion, my subordinates were great. So I had a command sergeant major, also from North Carolina, interestingly enough, great guy. We had a great relationship. So he would be, the senior enlisted leader in the battalion. I had 2 majors. One's the operations officer. The other is the executive officer. The executive officer is kind of like the second in command. Both of those guys, phenomenal guys. I had a great relationship with both of them. So the guys right around me in the battalion, I had a great relationship with. My executive officer and I were real close, and he used to kind of joke with me because I would say things like, "Hey, listen, guys," kind of with that inner core right around me. Sometimes behind closed doors with the command sergeant major or the executive officer, the operations officer, or sometimes with the group of them, I would say things like, "Hey, listen, guys, I don't know that I'm going to be in command much longer. So we just need to have a plan in place for, if I get pulled out of command, like we got to think about the battalion here." And my executive officer would say things like, "Hey, sir, I think you're going to be okay. I think you're going to be okay." And I'd say, "Nah, man, I really think I might get pulled out here, But they were good dudes, And then the rest of my subordinates, I would occasionally see some of the young soldiers on base. I would bump into them at the gas station on base or wherever, right? After I had been relieved of command, and I had some great conversations with some of the really young guys that were kind of heartwarming for me. So, and then I'll come back to that in a moment. But with my supervisors, so my brigade commander, so this would be the colonel, he's my direct boss. I told him when I came in to command, I said, "Hey, sir, you and other people are going to wonder why I'm wearing a mask. So I'm just going to tell you because people are going to ask you about me. I haven't taken the shots. I'm not going to take them. I know people are going to judge me for that, and I accept that. I acknowledge that that's going to happen." This is in an email. So it was about 2 days before I was going to take command. So he responded to me in an email and he said, "Hey, you're good with me. It's not mandated. So all good. Thanks for just giving me the heads up. You're right. People are going to ask." So that was in June. So fast forward, it's July. Mandate doesn't go into effect until August, but the writing is clearly on the wall. So one day I see the brigade commander and I say, "Hey, sir, just so you know, like this thing any day now could drop, this mandate, right? And just so you know, my stance has not changed." And he said to me, he looked at me and he said, "I hope it doesn't come to that," you know? Which I kind of took in a positive way because I felt like he was telling me, "I don't want to lose you. I don't want you to lose your career. So I hope you're not put in a situation where you kind of, have to do this." And to his credit, he never ever gave me any grief whatsoever. He never tried to talk me out of, the road that I was headed down. He was cool with me, and I'm appreciative of that. Now, I don't think he went to bat for me. I mean,
Yeah.
he's a coward just like all the other senior leaders, but I don't have any special animosity towards him just because he happened to be my boss at the time that this all happened. The 2-star general is the one who actually formally relieved me. A battalion
Okay.
commander's got to be relieved by the division commander. He didn't even do it in person. It was done via a memo, which was emailed to me 18 days after the memo had been signed. I think that was a totally cowardly move.
Yeah.
If I saw him in person right now, I would tell him that I thought that that was a cowardly move. Um, but to his credit, he and I did have a conversation about 2 months earlier, probably in early August. And behind closed doors, 101, he was completely cool with me. We were two gentlemen on opposite sides of an issue, both Army officers, both commanders, but one's a 2-star general and the other's a lieutenant colonel, and one's on the side of the Army and the other's, off the reservation. We know how that goes. But
Well,
it is what it is.
that's an interesting thread to pull on. So, two gentlemen on either side of the issue, right? Two educated gentlemen with worldly experience, right? These are not two 17-year-old high school seniors, right? So these are two guys that are educated men who have seen the world, right? On either side of the issue. So from his perspective, I mean, you may not know, but this is what I often wonder is the perspective. Look, we're in a business where you follow orders and the orders have come down from on high that you're going to allow this experiment into your internal biochemistry. And that's that. Is that the perspective, or is the perspective, hey, I really believe in this vaccine. This is what's required to keep our readiness up so we can go defend the country, or whatever the story is. You know what I mean? Like, what's the actual position that they're maintaining?
So if I view this as charitably as possible, and I actually believe this about both of my supervisors, the colonel and the 2-star general. At that time, I think they were both true believers in the shot.
Mm.
Now, I think that's incredibly naive, but whatever. So I think one, they believed probably that it was a lawful order. That's not true. And they also probably believed that this was safe and effective and necessary. Also untrue, right?
Because why would they lie?
Yeah, why would they lie? So my problem with that is, first of all, if you're a colonel or you're a general, right? You've been around the block a lot. You've been deployed multiple times, and the military, whatever, branch you're in, doesn't matter. Air Force, Army, Marines, doesn't matter. The military has put a lot of money into your education. And so you were expected at that level to have the strategic thinking ability to operate in a complex environment, understand the variables in that environment, the interplay between these dynamically shifting variables in that environment, and then make the best assessment amid perhaps incomplete information, but still make the best assessment as to what the threats are and what the optimal course of action could be. So whether these individuals, so somewhere along the way they failed in that. So whether it's a cognitive failure or whether it's an integrity failure, either of those deficiencies disqualifies you for your job at that level. It just does.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I'll say on that is, if I'm viewing this as charitably as possible, like, hey, listen, everybody was lied to. This was 2 years ago. Maybe you were a true believer. I got it. But hey, listen, that mandate came out 28 months ago. There are so many red flags. There are so many question marks that have come out in the last nearly 2.5 years. I don't give a shit what you believed 2.5 years ago. It's right now. You should know that there are so many question marks and so many red flags that if you were one of the individuals who was giving orders and kicking people out for their failure to comply, you should be doing a lot of research to figure out what you were a part of. And so if you're still ignorant right now, as we close out 2023, it's because you're willfully ignorant, and that makes you complicit.
And as a senior officer and a senior leader, you're then derelict, because part of, and this is, I think you were getting at this too, it's like part of your responsibility is to know that when an order comes down that you shouldn't follow. Right? Like, you're not allowed to, on someone else's orders, you're not allowed to go murder a village full of people, for example,
You guys have probably heard this, right? And it makes me angry. There are two lies out there that even some service members believe, or like some service members, parents, like the service members young, like their parents. And those two lies are, one, you have to follow all orders. No, you do not. And the military does actually a pretty damn good job about teaching people when they're young and they enter the service that, no, you are not expected to follow an order that is unlawful or unconstitutional. And in fact, you're obligated to either seek clarification as to the order that you received, but as a final recourse, disobey. You have a moral obligation to do that. But the other grand lie out there is that you're government property. Like, no, you're not government property. I mean, people say that, everyone's heard that. Sure, I got it. But you are not government property. And when you signed on the dotted line, no, you did not suspend all of your rights. Some of your rights, yes. You did not suspend all of your rights. You're not GI, government issue. End of story. You
don't become a tent.
When I was a super young guy up in DC, I was going through like security forces training. I was a security force Marine in the beginning. We visited the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And on the back of the tomb, everybody's aware of the box at the front of that thing, but on the back, there's like a little amphitheater with like a throne or something like that. And in the little atrium, little half round thing up there, it says something. This isn't verbatim, but it's to the effect of, when I assumed the role of the soldier, I did not set aside that of the citizen.
Yeah.
And to me, what that meant was, as a young guy, is like, no, I am a citizen. I just, my role currently as a citizen is to be a Marine. So I still have all the rights I had, because in the Marines, you get subjugated and fucking treated like a slave.
Mm-hmm.
And they just tell you, like, leadership of the Marine Corps is, my dad molested me, so I'm gonna molest you. That's how the fucking Marine Corps works. And then they say that it makes you the best warrior on the planet, and then you lose a war. So it's like, but to piggyback on a couple other things you said, it's a lawful order by a competent authority. It can even be a lawful order, but if the dude's incompetent, it's still not a lawful order, So my question is, for other people in other units, I know how I did it, and I can talk to that here in a second, is, did anybody talk to the battalion surgeon? I know in the Marine Corps, we got the NBC guys sprinkled around a little bit, like back at the Raider battalions, all they do is do urinalysis and fucking hold the clipboard for like PT tests.
Yep.
But they're supposed to be a biological weapons expert.
Yep.
So typically, how it worked was they would use EOD guys. We were the closest thing they had to like real functioning NBC guys,
Mm-hmm.
And so in your, I guess, battle with this, did you ever engage any of these people? Like, hey, NBC nerd, like, what is the real fucking deal protection for a virulent biological threat? Did you engage with any of that?
Yeah. So yeah, we have NBC guys, nuclear, biological, chemical. We have those guys at the unit level as well. And of course we have PAs, so physician's assistants, and then at the brigade level, so one level up, you'll actually have a physician. And so my battalion PA had taken the shots. Our brigade level physicians had also all taken the shots. But interestingly enough, when you were so one of the things you had to do, that the Army required you to do in order to officially refused the COVID shot, you actually had to go speak to one of those, the medical personnel. And so I went, as a lieutenant colonel, I went to go speak to one of the guys in the brigade surgeon cell. And I'm speaking to some physician, young guy, he was a captain. And I'm not, that's fine. I mean, so I'm a lieutenant colonel, he's a captain. I got no problem with that. He's the physician, but I'm asking him these questions. And this is early October of 2021. But I'm asking him these questions that he clearly cannot answer, And I mean, so much more information's come on the last 2 years, but I'm asking him these questions and I'm just trying to demonstrate to him, like, come on, none of this makes any medical sense. I know this and I'm not a physician. And I think deep down, you know that too. That was kind of my message to him. But I'll tell you, when I look across the military, there are 4 groups that I think have been more derelict than the others. First and foremost are the commanders. So I was a commander, I had to give up my command because of all of this. We are a commander-driven military. You guys are the same in the Marines. It's the same in the Army, the Air Force. It doesn't matter. When you are a commander in the military, you are considered to be the person who drives the operations process, and you drive it sometimes through sheer will. And I agree with that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's a bad thing if you have a bad commander, but somebody's got to be the one who is kind of not just the face of the unit, but also the one who, hey, you are the one who's got to own what this unit does or fails to do. And that's you, commander. And so when the unit does well, yeah, you get a high five. But when the unit doesn't do well, you get a kick in the ass, commander, because you're the commander. And I'm cool with that. Like, I understand that. So first and foremost, dereliction of commanders across the board, almost at all levels. The second group, the military medical community, right? The third group, all the JAGs, the lawyers that told their commanders that this was lawful when it's clearly unlawful. And I tell you a fourth group, and I feel bad. I can point my finger at commanders because I was one. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. And I'm not a chaplain. But my fourth group are the chaplains. Chaplains, again, just completely dropped the ball on this,
Yeah, I never even thought about them. I'm so used to just kind of ignoring the chaplains.
Well, this probably leads to the discussion of, so behind you isn't a wife and kids, right? You're, one up lone operator as far as like making decisions for life, right? And what some of these guys would say, well, I had to do this and I had to do that because it turns into this thing where they are now beholden to their mortgage. Well, how was I going to feed my wife and kids kind of thing? And the thing that trips me out, it's almost like in that weird decision-making matrix, like nowhere is my wife and kids will now live in a fucking country of medical tyranny.
Mm-hmm.
If I go along with this, it's like all the short-term shit of like, well, I have to keep my career. I have to, with these chaplains and shit, right? Like it's either they are robots across the board and we're just the small group of malfunctioning cogs, or large portions of them knowingly just fucking went along with it.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, but it's more complicated than that, I think, because we knew instantly, pretty much, not that we had the whole thing figured out, but we knew we weren't taking that shot. And we had a bunch of reasons why, right? People that didn't have that perspective, they had no reason to think that anything tyrannical was going on, really. Not no reason, but less reason. Like when this came up I think it was the 90s, people tried to push back against the anthrax vaccine. And I was in the Marines when that happened. And I never thought twice about the anthrax vaccine. And when those people were pushing back, I was like, what's their fucking problem? Then when I came back in the Marines, I had a break in service for like 2 years. I came back in after September 11th. They'd lost my shot record and they're like, you got to get all this shit again to include the anthrax vaccine. And I just like kind of laughed. I'm like, that again, right? But I wasn't in the headspace where. So I don't like, I know this is different than the anthrax thing, but maybe it's just different for us and not for them.
Well, I think onto that note, unfortunately, everybody is stuck in like this weird loop, right? Where it's like the fucking loop of yesterday, right? Like I'm trying to make this into an intelligent statement. So it's like we believe in the Americana. I use that term already of like, hey, the American dream, all that shit. Like this place isn't completely corrupt. But, when that shot showed up, we had, I mean, it was like the mandate. It was pretty hot on the heels of us losing Afghanistan, right? Like it was either
When
right
was
before, right after.
yeah,
right before,
it was
actually.
before
Yeah.
when yeah.
Um,
But we were in the middle of it.
Yeah.
in any event, it's one of those things where it's like, at what point does enough bullshit pile up that you basically have to start asking questions? And I guess the answer is it just hadn't piled up for those people yet.
Yeah.
I think so. There are two things I would say about that. So one is, I think you guys are right. You only know what you know, and there was a time when each of the three of us went along with the narrative, just like people are doing now. However, the difference that I would say is the whole COVID thing is, I don't understand how you can still believe the story. I mean, it just has the story has so many holes in it,
Yeah.
you know? So I don't understand these people who are 6 or 7 shots in.
It's crazy.
And yeah, I mean, come on, So I do feel like it's a little bit different than people who bought the story about 9/11 for a couple of years, myself included.
Yeah.
And then I got to a point where I remember, I can tell you the day that I realized that when my government says A, I just automatically assume B, or at least, they say A and I assume not A. I will tell you the day.
Okay.
That day was, the exact date it might have been May 1st. That might not be the exact date, but of 2011, which is the day that they supposedly shot bin Laden.
Okay. Yeah.
That
I
whole
was on
story.
CBS. Yeah.
Yeah, so and then buried him at sea or what.
Yeah.
I just remember hearing that story, and I was like, that is the just the biggest crock of bullshit I have ever heard, and I just didn't believe it for a second. And that's kind of the moment where I realized, my government is going to lie about everything.
Yeah. And just since we're on that, this is something we talk about all the time. It's obvious to most people that are in the like truther kind of sphere, but like you take the bin Laden raid, right? So
Mhm.
that happens, and then even guys that, like from the inside in the military, they're like, you kind of smell a rat or whatever, right?
Mhm.
But then you really know you've been jobbed when they release their movie. So they wait a couple years, and then it's Jessica Chastain is the hot CIA agent that does all the work that the men couldn't do, and finds bin Laden, and they give you, so they're gonna cast.
This is zero. You're talking about the movie Zero Dark 30? Is
Yeah,
that the movie?
Yeah.
So that's, and the purpose of that is for everybody else that's experiencing the world events primarily through screens.
Yeah.
That gives them an opportunity to experience how we got bin Laden, and it becomes mythology. It becomes
mythology.
real.
That's
It
right.
becomes real enough.
Yeah.
The only people that know better are some people like us that are like, yeah, bullshit, and then a handful of SEALs that were or weren't there, or did or didn't get shot down in a CH-47 a couple
Oh
years
man,
ago.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
the thing gets more complicated. But yeah, it's interesting that
Well, so you guys probably have a very smart audience, so they're probably aware of this. But there's a super tight relationship between DoD, the intelligence apparatus, and of course Hollywood.
Yeah.
For two reasons. One is for kind of that culture creation, or almost like cultural engineering, right?
Yeah.
But then another is kind of that perception management on a huge scale, which is to some degree, movies create this perception of what people are supposed to accept as reality.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah. Lone Survivor will tell you that it's absolutely heroic to be on a completely failed SR mission and get your whole fucking team whacked.
Yeah.
Like,
It's war movies and Americans, I believe, are uniquely susceptible to this, right? We take pride in our military, which I think is a good thing, right? We consider ourselves to be a nation that was born of war, and I got it. I got it. But because of that, we can be susceptible to that. All Americans all love a good war movie. But because of that, you're vulnerable to being propagandized through something that you think is just entertainment, or through something that you think is like a historical, pick your historical movie, like your World War II movie or whatever. But those are often done for, propaganda purposes first and foremost,
Yes.
Same thing with all the Vietnam movies.
Yeah, Saving Private Ryan makes you look the other way from Operation Paperclip, and like
Well, and
that kind of shit.
and
Like,
it's a nice little arrangement these guys have back and forth, because it's like, hey, I'm Jerry Bruckheimer or whatever, and I want to film. I don't even know what movie. So I want to film, a movie about the Battle of Midway or something, and it would be very expensive for me to try to get my hands on a bunch of actual military. Well, that's a bad example. Let's pick one like Black Hawk Down, right? Well, I want to put out a story. I'm the Department of Defense, and I want to put out a sterilized, sanitized story about Black Hawk Down. Well, what I have to offer are a bunch of Black Hawks, a bunch of military equipment, a bunch of tanks, a bunch of Humvees, a bunch of access to people and bases that make the movie look real. So it's a win-win. It's like, hey, we get our propaganda out, you get a movie that looks real and has, and some of the movies they do, even though when it's propaganda, you can appreciate, like, you can see some of these movies, well, like Lone Survivor being one of them. You're like, you look at how they showed those guys the gear, the bait, like where they live. I'm like, this is a very authentic looking feeling. And then that's what sucks me in, because like anything that like looks authentic, I'm like, all right, I'll go for the ride. Like I want to go for the ride, even though I know it's trying to do things to my brain.
Well, so now it's kind of weird. So now we're fucking post COVID. The Army released some letter saying that well, you actually got the letter in physical reality, right?
I did. Yeah.
So can you recap for the folks exactly what that letter said? Or not exactly, but to kind of paraphrase for it, because I got it from the internet.
Yeah, so the letter, they started sending out the letter at the beginning of November. So kind of, throughout the first half of November, people were starting to get this letter. So the letter was sent out by the Army. I do believe that the Air Force sent out something similar, but obviously I was in the Army. I got the one from the Army. And all the letter says, it was a whole lot of nothing. Okay, so the letter says, hey, you can get your records corrected. You can get your records corrected if you have something derogatory in your file that came as, part of refusing to take the shot or whatever. Now, that should not be news for anybody. So processes for the correction of service records, that's been around forever. And they were sending this out to people who either, like me, who either left the Army of their own accord, or people who were, kicked out against their own will. They didn't want to get kicked out, but they got separated. And so those individuals, the ones who got kicked out, a lot of them got kicked out of the Army and they received a general discharge. So the characterization of their discharge is not an honorable discharge, but it's a general discharge, even if it's a general discharge under honorable conditions, which is not the same thing as an honorable discharge. Now, you guys will well know, but for those who are listening that may not know, if you have something that is not an honorable discharge on your discharge paperwork from the military, that does have serious ramifications. It can limit the type of benefits that you get. It can make it challenging when you go to a new employer and he asks for that paperwork, which is common. They ask for your military discharge paperwork. You show them some paperwork that says something that is not an honorable discharge and may even have a code on there that says misconduct. And so he doesn't know, this potential new employer doesn't know that misconduct code on there, where it says misconduct, is because you didn't take the COVID shot. I mean, does that mean you have a drunk driving incident? Does that mean that you had a domestic violence incident, and that's why you got kicked out? Just, it could be whatever,
Yeah.
So the Army sent this out, and it was not well received by people like myself who just got the letter and just kind of laughed it off and said, this is not what it appears to be. Now, it's maybe from like a PR perspective, it looks like the Army is kind of trying to embrace people and maybe bring them back in. In fact, the bottom paragraph of the letter says, if you would like to pursue re-entry into the Army, go visit your local recruiter.
Yeah.
So a lot of people like myself had some problems with the letter, because it's like, hey, first of all, you're not telling us anything new. You can always appeal to get your service record corrected, right? The other thing is that for those who got kicked out and they did not even get kicked out with the dignity of an honorable discharge, they should not have to request to get that status, that discharge status, upgraded. The Army should just do it. The Army should just do an internal audit, look and see who they kicked out, who they did not give an honorable discharge to. And if the only thing derogatory in their file was, the COVID vax refusal or whatever, then just internally fix their discharge status and then inform them. You don't need them to go through the process of requesting. And then the other thing is, everyone knows that the military right now is hurting in terms of retention and recruitment. So just that bottom paragraph that says, hey, if you want to come back in, go talk to your local recruiter. That's just not, people aren't, I mean, they're just not going to buy that,
Yeah. And it was very quietly that they kind of ended the mandate, right? Like that kind of just went away with a whimper, I guess. The 1 minute 1 minute's required and the next that it's not,
Yeah. And have you guys seen, you guys might have seen, there are pictures that people have put out there where they'll find like a recruiting poster, and it'll say in big letters on the poster, hey, COVID-19 shot no longer required. Like,
they made marketing material specifically for that.
Yeah. They want you to know, like, hey, listen, but here's the problem. Because there are a lot of people out there that have some misconceptions around the repeal of the mandate. So DOD's hands were forced by Congress, and that does not make Congress the good guys here. Congress has been just as cowardly as DOD on this whole thing. But there's some theater that's going on to make people believe that, positive actions have occurred. But what happened was, a year ago with the 2023 National Defense Authorization Act, Congress did force their hand by including some language in there that said that DOD would repeal the mandate. And so they did. But let's be honest about what happened. That meant that the mandate was no longer required. DOD was not forced to kind of reverse it and go back and restore everyone who had been harmed by the shot, people whose careers had been sidelined. And let's not even talk about the people who are now injured, like permanently injured, or people who have died. You know what I'm saying?
It was almost immediate that we had a guy I know, and he came and told me about it afterwards. And this is a guy I wasn't friends with. So the fact that he was like being honest with this, and this is like an E9, who had to go to the ER for a cardiac incident. And, this is a Marine Raider. I mean, the dude's fit. He shouldn't be having cardiac instances. And then, one of our majors in our cyber section, another dude had another, young Marine major. This is a fit individual.
Yep.
He had to go to the ER, and this fairly quickly right after the fucking mandate.
There was a female captain that got cancer out of nowhere for seemingly.
Oh, did another dude get diabetes?
Yep, diabetes.
Like just, hey, it's Tuesday, you got diabetes now.
This is just like amongst the group of people we happen to know.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, I know that, you can't just anecdotally, hey, look, but I just taking a small sample size, and being like, hey, these are anomalous. These are hyper fit people that are in their, mid to late 30s at the prime of their like athletic prowess and stuff that have diabetes. What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah. It makes no sense.
Right.
And the other thing that I'll say about the National Defense Authorization Act is, if you're one of these individuals who is pursuing legal action, right? And then part of your case hinges on the fact that the mandate is in effect. If the mandate goes away, your lawsuit may go away, because now potentially you don't have any legal standing to continue to sue.
Even if
I think that was done deliberately.
So that takes some of the fuel out of even if you can demonstrate that it definitely was a mandate when you did it, or
I mean, obviously, they're still trying to fight. They're still trying to fight. But I think behind closed doors, the NDAA was a trap all along. That's Brad Miller's opinion. Now, did it stop the mandate? Is that a good thing? Yes, but I think it was like a pressure valve that was used to let off some steam. It lets off some steam, and now you get people who are like, all right, cool, that was a problem, that sucked, but now it's solved. Like, no,
Yeah,
it's
but it's
not
not.
solved.
No, because there's been no accountability. There's
That's right.
what caused this breakdown
Yeah.
in
Are you tracking where the SEALs are at with their lawsuit? There was a group of SEAL, I think, got through the Texas maybe Supreme Court, and then into, I don't know why the fuck it would go through Texas, but I thought there was some legislators, something where the SEALs had won.
So
Basically,
there
their
have
religious
been there have been a
exemption.
couple of victories, Um, there have been a couple of victories. What there has not been is like a widespread victory that has caused a precedent that just brings the whole thing down. So, and I'm not the expert on kind of exactly the legal
Yeah.
particularities for each of these cases, but what I will say is, um, the mandate was clearly unlawful. I mean, it was based on fraud, and most of your listeners are probably aware of like the whole, the shell game, like the bait and switch between the Pfizer BioNTech product and the Comirnaty product,
Yeah, I've heard about it.
yeah.
Yeah, so they basically approved a product that was not available for anybody to take. But then they said, "Hey, there's an approved product." But then everybody who thought, "Oh, the Pfizer product is approved," the shot that they would have gone to take was the Pfizer BioNTech product. The Comirnaty one that was approved, what was it? I mean, they approved a ghost product, so it's a complete bait and switch. It's total
Crazy.
fraud. So the whole thing is unlawful. Um, what we haven't really been able to get legally is for for that to be demonstrably proven uh in such a way that it becomes precedent across the board, or at least that's my understanding, but I'm not super involved. I'm also trying to pursue some legal action, but I'm not intimately involved in exactly what all has been argued to this point. But in theory, if that could be argued and it just became known that, hey, this thing was unlawful, then you would hope that the deck of cards would collapse. And I'll tell you the way that I think this happens, or kind of the way that what I think needs to happen. It's kind of a three-pronged strategy here.
Yeah, I was going to ask you because I'm solutions oriented type guy.
Yeah,
Let's war
so
game some solutions, man.
yeah, so here's what I think, kind of big picture, and then we can talk about specifically what's got to happen within each of the pillars. So, do you guys use the term AAR in the Marines, after action
Yeah.
review? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I figured you did. So we do too in the Army. I think everybody does. So I use the acronym AAR, right? But for me, what this stands for is acknowledgement, accountability, restitution. So I think acknowledgement, there are kind of two subcategories under acknowledgement. One, there has to be widespread, full and complete acknowledgement that the mandate was unlawful for the reasons we just said, and then also harmful. Now, harmful means that it was harmful physically, it was harmful morally, and I do believe that moral injury is a real thing that is our entire force is suffering from. But there are people who suffered, career injury or financial injury. So, I mean, there are a lot of ways in which people were harmed by the shot. So we got to acknowledge that it was unlawful and harmful. And then next is accountability. Well, if there are crimes that were committed, then there are people who committed those crimes. They have to be held accountable. We're a nation of laws. Even in the military, there's the Uniform Code of Military Justice. The military violated its own regulations. Also, all these individuals who push this, I mean, they all violated their own oaths to the Constitution. And lastly, I would say, for leaders in the military whose conduct may not have quite met the threshold of being criminal, because of their position, it may still have been entirely unacceptable. And so
Yeah.
they should still be relieved or, sent packing out the door with perhaps, a downgrade in their retirement rank or whatever, but that's accountability.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then lastly, restitution. So if we acknowledge that all this stuff happened and we've held people accountable, those who perpetrated against all of us, then we got to do what we can to create some restitution for those who were harmed. So first of all, the VA, we all know how screwed up the VA is, but the VA is not even recognizing that people are injured from this thing.
Yeah.
Which is just incredible. So if we want to create restitution, we have to acknowledge what has happened. We got to get these people some treatment. In order for you to get physically treated for a COVID-19 vax injury, doctors have to admit that that's what injured you. You know what I'm saying? But above and beyond that, we got to look at people who lost their careers, or who maybe they were able to squeak by until the repeal went into place. So maybe they're still in uniform, but their careers have been sidelined. Well, we should be rewarding those people. You know what I mean? If the individuals who held out amid tremendous pressure, and they're the ones who stuck to their guns, they're the ones who actually embodied the the warrior ethos, the military
values.
culture. Those individuals should really be rewarded. That would be a way to kind of show restitution and how we're going to take care of this, and how we're going to realign the Department of Defense and kind of relook our priorities and get rid of all the people that were a part of this. Now, I'm not necessarily predicting that that's going to all happen super easily. I'm just saying that if we don't have acknowledgement, accountability, and restitution, then we're not going to fix this. I also would say, kind of my closing point on this is, I'm not saying that the COVID vax mandate is the only problem that our military is suffering. There's a lot of other problems right now that just blow your mind, right? But what I will say is, if we don't fix this problem, our military will not recover, at least within the next generation.
Yeah, I agree with that. They have to do something that the military has to restore its own honor if it's going to if it's going to have any hope of attracting the kind of people that it needs in order to do the things that they want to use the military for. So by that, I mean, and we can just be honest about it. There's obviously all kinds of people in the military, but anybody that knows anything knows it's a bunch of like farm kids from the flyover states that comprise the bulk of the ground combat units for the whole military. And I don't mean it's farm kids. I'm just being like colloquially.
Yep.
It's people from the middle of the country that have like traditional values, that see the military as like a lot of things, adventure, a chance to serve. But these are like the robust, aggressive males from our country that you send out to go be in infantry units and stuff and all kinds of. So, but like, guess what? Those guys, for the last 2-3 years now, our government, our country has been shouting with a bullhorn about how terrible those kind of people are.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, you chased a bunch of them out of the military. And then anybody from that, like if I talk to young people now, I certainly am not telling them to go pursue an exciting and rewarding career in the special operations community.
No.
As fulfilling as that was for me, and it's how much of a fucking blast I had the whole time. And I literally I loved it. I would not tell, like, my son's not going anywhere near the military. You're not getting like that sucks. Like, it should be people like us that are like telling our children, like, look, this is what I got out of this service to my country. It was rewarding in these ways. And, hey, I'd be proud to you to follow I'd be like, hell no, I'll chain you to a concrete pole in this yard if you try to go wandering off to a recruiter.
Yeah. And that's a common theme. Military service for a long time has been generational. Mom or dad served, grandpa served, great grandpa served, right? And now I keep hearing this from people who are probably, our age or whatever. Maybe they got kids that are teenagers, they got kids, that are young adults, right? They're kind of at that age where they're trying to figure out what they want to do. And you got people who serve full careers, and they're like, no, do not go in the military. It's not what it used to be.
And yeah, go ahead.
Well, we're pretty conspiratorial minded here on this show, and I would almost say that part of the drive of that whole thing was to identify people of high moral standard. I get them right the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
So I got asked a question about a year ago. This is right after I got out. One of the first interviews that I did. And mind you, this was a year ago, right? A lot's happened in the last year. And the question that I got was, could you see the American military turning on the public? Which is a frightening question, but it's a question we got. I mean, if we're being honest with ourselves, we got to ask ourselves the question. And so the way that I answered that question a year ago was, I think that is possible, but not likely right now, but it's a lot more likely than it was a couple of years ago. So what I would say now, 1 year later, I would say, again, it's even more likely than it was, a year ago. Here's the problem. the military is already, it has already turned against us. It's just that it's not what people think. Now it could be, you could have dudes in uniform, you know what I'm saying? Like going door to door. Like we could get to that point. But the thing is that the military has been operating against its own citizenry and against its own troops for a very long time. I mean, you mentioned, Operation Paperclip.
Yep.
Yeah, unfortunately, Operation Paperclip seems to kind of have never ended. It just morphed into all this nonsense we got going on, right now. DARPA, to some degree, directly or indirectly, DARPA and all the shenanigans that they pull probably has, I don't know if I've ever read this anywhere, but probably has its origins somewhere in the greater, paperclip community there,
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, DARPA spawned from ARPA, and
Yes.
the internet came from Army research, and the internet came from fucking ARPA. I mean, it's like, and it's called a World Wide Web. And what lives in the center of a web?
Yeah.
A fucking spider. Like
It's not that hard to imagine that they could, because this is how they do everything, right? They could, when you're talking about the military being actually used against, physically, tactically against the citizens, I could see it being the military used against certain segments of the population, right? So all they would have to do is do a convincing job, of painting that, hey, this type of person in this demographic that does this kind of behavior is a threat to everybody else.
Yeah.
And then just get enough, the tipping point of Americans to go along with, well, yeah, look, those people over there, these separatists, these preppers, whatever the demographic is. And then you get, as you continue to do this demographic replacement, and again, that's like supposedly this is like white supremacist dog whistling. I'm the furthest thing from a white supremacist, right? I'm simply talking about the fact that there is a demographic replacement going on, and so look, as we start allowing these people that have come across the southern border to join the military, well, now you've got somebody in uniform that isn't loyal or beholden to anybody else in the country, being told being employed, being paid to go after certain segments. So yeah, right now, tomorrow, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's trending towards being not inconceivable outcome.
And it's I think to some degree COVID, and this is why I think the whole thing, not just the shots, but like the whole thing, COVID, it was an op,
Yeah.
And I kind of assumed that from the very beginning, and I assumed that I was never convinced that this whole thing originated in China. And I'm talking about the early days when we were first hearing about, bats and,
pangolins and shit.
Yeah. And I just remember thinking, I think this is originating in the West, probably with the United States. Now there may be some collusion with China that may be happening, but as more information came out, it just looked more and more like this is an op, and more specifically, it's a military op, and DoD is at the center of it. And you want to get more in, within the center of DoD. DARPA's had a huge role. But we've mentioned Paperclip a couple of times, right? So one of the things that came out of Paperclip was you had a lot of these, some of whom were, physicians, not to mention all the scientists and physicists, in the whole space program, et cetera. But you had a lot of like what became known as MK Ultra.
Yep.
Was piggybacking off of research that had already been done by literal Nazi doctors, etc. And so when you look at the MK and MK Ultra is just mind control in German.
Yeah.
Right.
So but you look at like those programs have never stopped. They've just gotten larger, and I don't pretend to be an expert on this, right? But there are ways in which they perform, mind control, for lack of a better term, on individuals, in very horrendous ways.
Yep.
But then there are also ways in which they do it more broadly against everybody, against all of us. We already talked about movies, but just, we are inundated with that kind of stuff. And if people don't realize it, then you're just going to be susceptible to getting kind of corralled in the direction that they want you to go, choosing the path that they want you to go down. And so when they give you the messaging that, hey, this group of people is a threat to all of us, or, whatever, unfortunately, people who don't know that they're constantly being propagandized and to some degree even, mind controlled, they're going to be vulnerable to that type of messaging,
Well, yeah, and on that, just something that Cody hit me to that put the idea in my head, but like, and this is a kind of a complicated subject for us since you're going to continue to see a lot more from places like John Hopkins University and other places that are doing a bunch of research specifically with combat veterans and psychedelics, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about MDMA treatment, psilocybin, ayahuasca, all this other stuff.
Yep.
Now, Cody and I happen to be people that are proponents of that plant medicine, right? And have taken advantage. I was with a veteran organization, went down to Peru for an ayahuasca retreat, these type of things. I'm not against those things. Okay. But because this is something Cody put in my mind. Like, I think that the reason, and we've dealt with, in our contracting job, we've dealt a little bit with John Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, and we know kind of what those people are capable of there. And I don't consider them to be capable of altruism. Right. So, I think that if there's institutions that are involving themselves with veterans and psychedelics, it will be to mitigate the veteran as a viable pocket of resistance to their nonsense, or worse, it'll be to MK Ultra veterans or something. Or I just don't think it's altruism. I think it's highly likely that they know that there's hundreds of thousands of men running around their country that have combat experience and are probably not too happy about the state of things. And this is a great way to get them in treatments, get them in some sort of, because it's never just the psychedelics. It's psychedelics with a little bit of new age philosophy, or other weirdness.
This is kind of what got me thinking about that was, so like Aaron said, like, I have healed a lot of my combat nonsense through the use of psychedelics and cannabis, right? Like, I've never been on an SSRI. I've never taken anything but Motrin from the fucking VA. Well, Motrin and vitamin D. I did it all basically rogue status. I didn't go to any of the stuff that was veteran stuff. I went out into the woods and fucking talk to the next realm. I did. So, that got me hip to the potential of that actually being a solution for other people that have gone through the shit that we've gone through. Right. So from there, that's the jumping off point. And so from there, you get into looking at all these other things and these retreats, et cetera, because this stuff's not legal in America and et cetera. You start doing your research. Well, so when I was researching some of these other things, that's when I started seeing things like Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, or I'm sorry, not Johns Hopkins Applied Physics, but Johns Hopkins Medical. And Johns Hopkins. People think it's, a hospital, which it is, but it's also famous for making the variable time fuse, or like the proximity fuse that was used to shoot down shit tons of Japanese bombers and shit. Like, that's a weapons lab.
And a lot of weird gadgets and shit.
Yeah. And then we would hire them to do bespoke one-off
weird shit.
Like weird shit, like weird shit. So then that sent me down the rabbit hole of just like looking into this stuff. And of course you funnel into the MK Ultra thing. And essentially what you start looking at is the counterculture of the 60s, right? Where you're hey, there's a young group of people that don't want to die in a fucking rice paddy somewhere, for another false flag, the Gulf of Tonkin. So, they're getting ready to burn down the fucking government. So essentially what happens is, you get the most high powered CIA LSD you can get your hands on, and you just blast those dudes out. Now, instead of like being like, ripped and fit hippies who are about to take the country over, you get a bunch of people sliding through the fucking mud in Woodstock and doing nothing. Right. So you fast forward to where we are time now. And, he just got me hip to the smartest man in America. What the fuck's this guy's name? Kagan or some shit? Langan. Yeah. And, you scroll through Langan's profile real quick on Wikipedia, and, which is another CIA op. And like down at the bottom, it says that, he thinks 9/11 was an inside job. And then it says he has other anti-Semitic dog whistles or some shit in there. But clearly the smartest man in America understands that 9/11 was an inside job. So then you look at the veteran community, and, we got had essentially like I was so convinced by the war on terror that I disarmed bombs with my bare fucking hands under gunfire. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was sold,
Sure.
But,
sure.
So now there's going to be more and more of us, right? Like, we just ran into a couple of young Air Force kids who were like, this is fucking nonsense, right? Like,
Yep.
they were hip to it, which I don't know what they're doing in the Air Force, but they're like E2s or E3s or some shit. Maybe they're fresh joined, but like, but the problem is like, what happens when like Delta dudes start figuring out they got fucking had? What happens when like 7th group dudes? What happens when Raiders start figuring out?
They've got a big liability probably.
So now all of a sudden you have you got your Joe Rogans, man, and you got your Sean Ryans talking about this shit, and it's like so here's the problem with psychedelics. I can tell people from a firsthand experience is it is an empathogen, right? It will improve your empathy, maybe not his empathy, but
I
like
don't have any empathy.
yeah, but it will increase your empathy, right? Like killing shit literally bums me out nowadays, and I've done like a fucking butcher's bill with a killing, right? Like even killing rabbits, I'm like, fuck, man. Like just because I just respect life more, man. Like I'm more in tune with like the web of life, you know, like and it's now, so that empathogen type thing is not going to stop me from maintaining this discontent in my heart for the fucking government just because I am who I am, you know, but maybe somebody else goes from being like, well, fuck this. I want to know exactly how COVID 9/11 was pulled off to like, his name's now Moonbow and he braids his hair and shit. And like, you know, wears beaded bracelets and is in Peru doing ayahuasca and shit. You know, it's a,
well, that's my thing.
like,
It's the thing is these things, no matter what your perspective on them is, they're very powerful. And so, they're powerful in a lot of weird ways, but like I think the government's been studying this stuff all the way back. This is what the Stanford mind control experiment, the MK Ultra, they were using psychedelics, all that stuff. So like we think, you know, it's been out of their study of it's been out of the public eye, but I don't believe for a second. I think they know a lot more about these molecules than we do. And they know exactly like how to effectively use them to whatever kind of bespoke end state they want. So I like, it's a weird spot to be in because like I want anybody that's in pain or whatever to do whatever they got to do to feel better and fix their life and all the positive, you know, things that I've gotten out of it. But at the same time, it's like I'm so weary of institutions at this point where I'm like, dude, if it says US Gov on it, like don't eat it.
Hey, so you guys bring up a very interesting point. I just happen to have this like right next to me right here. You guys familiar with this book?
What's
you guys you see that Brave New
looks,
World?
Oh yeah, Aldous Huxley.
Aldous Huxley, yeah.
So
Soma, right?
Soma.
Yeah, that's Soma.
Yeah, Soma. So I've also got right here. You know, so this is 1984. Most people have heard of it in 1984.
Yeah, we're in like a merger of those two books. We're like,
I agree. So most people are familiar with 1984. Not as many people are familiar with Brave New World, but one of the major themes in Brave New World, and I would encourage people out there, you got to read these books. You got to read these books because we do kind of live in some weird hybrid of the two. But drugs, specifically what is called Soma, is a huge theme in Brave New World, and that's because Aldous Huxley himself was into that. And there are a couple of things that are just interesting about Aldous Huxley. So first of all, this dude is from a family of elites in London.
Yeah.
You know, his brother Julian, you know, the director of UNESCO, I believe.
these are
but he was
socialists.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So he was and George Orwell and Aldous Huxley, you know, they knew each other. But Aldous Huxley, a lot of people don't necessarily know this. You know when Aldous Huxley died? Aldous Huxley died on the same day as C.S. Lewis, the author. But both of them died on the same day as John F. Kennedy. So November 22nd, 1963, all three of those individuals died. So the death of C.S. Lewis and the death of Aldous Huxley on any other day would have been big news. It was not, because obviously JFK had just been assassinated. Yeah. But on the day that Aldous Huxley died, he was in the hospital. I think he had cancer, if I remember correctly. But he asked his wife to basically shoot him up with mescaline or whatever he was taking.
I think I have.
He tripped his way on out the door.
Yeah.
But he lived the last part of his life, I think a couple of decades, in and around Los Angeles. You know, this would have been in the 50s and the early 60s because he died in 63.
Right, hanging out with like, wasn't he part of that whole thing? He's like hanging out with Philip K. Dick and Ron Hubbard and these other weirdos.
So,
who had a whole
yeah,
thing going on.
all this stuff.
Jack
So if
Parsons.
people are
Yeah.
familiar with the book by Dave McGowan, Weird Scenes at the Canyon, all about Laurel Canyon and kind of
Yeah,
the whole. So that's a fantastic resource for kind of understanding this weird intersection in that part of the country, right? This weird intersection between the government, like the military, the intelligence apparatus, um, Hollywood and the music industry, drugs, cults, like religious cults.
Yeah.
You got the whole Charles Manson thing kind of comes out of there,
Yeah,
and
Scientology came out of there.
then secret societies, you guys mentioned Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard. So just a weird anyway, Aldous Huxley was kind of in the early stages of that kind of stuff. So kind of going back to you guys' comments about how the ways in which certain types of substances could be used to harm an individual. And I would agree with your assessment that, like, John Hopkins medical department or whatever, yeah, probably working in league with the government or some section of the government to appear to be helping veterans, while in reality, either studying them to understand how we can kind of marginalize these guys should we ever need to,
and
or some other type of nefarious activity. I think you guys are dead on with that assessment as to what's going on.
The extra insidious part is, and because people, like, when you start to hip them to this stuff, they're like, oh, you think everybody's actively conspiring to do all this evil shit, and it's like, no, the people involved most likely think they're doing good. Like they're just indoctrinated into this scientific worldview that's very mechanistic, and they can be convinced that, like, look, science is the only solution to any problem there ever was. And look, there's these guys here that we're going to use this chemical to help, and we're going to help them in this way, and it's going to up. These aren't people that are like, ooh, we're going to hurt these veterans. Maybe at the top, maybe at some level, there's some sort of, ringleader, but that's what really makes these things hard for people to understand is, yeah, these people aren't doing bad. Just like I wasn't actively pursuing evil ends while I'm shooting teenagers on the other side of the planet. As far as I'm concerned, I'm doing the Lord's good work,
Mm-hmm.
So it's very, these conspiracies they're like hard to, really conceptualize in a normal way.
And what I perceive the they as nowadays, like since becoming a farmer, I believe I've like opened a new like door of perception to talk about some Huxley shit. When I like is
yeah, you're right.
Like I understand is you got that book too, Doors of Perception, is
which is where the band The Doors got their name. Yeah.
Is I was looking at the rabbits one day, man, and the whole thing with the rabbits is, right before they get culled, they get separated and fattened up. And I was like, I was just looking at the rabbit hutch one day. And I'm like, fuck, man, that was COVID, dude. Like they separated everybody. They stuck them in little rooms. They told them they couldn't leave their house. They shut down the gyms. Everybody started eating fucking junk food. And I'm like, so what I look at the they and the them as now is as human farmers, man. And we all just live on different, like little fucking tax farms. And, I'm not sure where I was going with that in general. Oh, is when you start looking at it like that, and Aaron and I have both kind of worked in sensitive activities for a very long time. And a lot of what that is like the management of human capital to get a job done, right? You're using like military source operations, that kind of shit. Is you select people for their strengths towards a certain task. And there's nothing saying that when you're looking at meta human farming, that they of course wouldn't, they need the show to operate. So for the show to operate, you need good characters and bad characters. So, it's pro wrestling. They're going to recruit Hulk Hogan, just like and Hulk Hogan might be a true believer. And it's even better if Hulk Hogan is a true believer. That way he's not acting. He's not pretending. Right. Your human farmers, like your CIA, your fucking like, whatever, CFR, whatever you want. The people who give steering pushes, little rudder steers to people along their lives. They can create a hero, or they can enable a villain. So a lot of people, so everybody isn't in on it. You know, everybody is not in on it is what I'm trying to get to. Like, I think people, the people who are like, well, that guy's not in on it. It's like, yeah, of course not. Like,
Yep.
like you need people to function as those pressure release valves of like visible good humans, right?
Yep.
Because if everybody was a fucking villain, we'd be like, yeah, we got to get rid of these fucking people, man. Like,
too obvious.
like
Yeah,
you need those bumbling fools who are just kind-hearted, but just can't seem to carry the fucking ball over the goal line on anything for humanity. But then we're like, oh, they're just incompetent, you know? Like, does that make any sense as a point?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because, if you believe that everybody in the government was evil, well, I mean, that means that the dude who delivers your mail is evil.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, come on. But here's the thing, going back to those two books, 1984 and Brave New World. So, 1984 is kind of considered to be the boot stamping on the face. That's the hard approach. Brave New World is a little bit more the soft approach where the government doesn't necessarily have to kill you. They make you love your servitude. You become an agent of your own slavery. And so I think a lot of people have said for a while, hey, we kind of live in the Brave New World model, which I think is true. My fear, though, is, hey, but don't think that they're above using the hard approach if it comes to it. So it can be a hybrid of the two.
Yeah.
But they move us into these one of the ways in which they kind of like move us into a new phase of their control apparatus is they get you to be an agent of your own enslavement. So for example, they feed you propaganda, and if you don't know any better, you don't realize that you're being propagandized because you listen to their music and you watch their movies and you watch their TV shows, you eat their food, even sports. I mean, I grew up as an athlete, but I mean,
Sports ball.
even professional sports, I mean, it's all like occult rituals. I mean, it's crazy. It's all cultural engineering. And it's just,
Well, with the sports, they've crossed the line into pure entertainment, right? So there is an athletic competition of some stripe happening, but they're blurring the lines now. That's just like some of it's becoming, and I don't watch any sports. And I grew up like that was a big part of like any, I didn't have a super close relationship with my father, but if we did have anything bonding, it was over like baseball, like the San Francisco Giants and stuff. And football, baseball. I grew up, kind of like any normal kid in the burbs, like playing and watching sports or whatever. But at some point, like these people, now when if you tune into any sports, you're watching a melodrama with Taylor Swift is dating some guy from the Chiefs, and you're like, oh, they're producing a drama. They're turning everything into a form of pro wrestling, or because it's like it's pragmatic. It's like what we've conditioned ourselves into this model where it's like what gets the most attention, good or bad, for the longest duration. And it's like there's a pure ethic to athletic competition, and that's what originally drew us to it.
Yep.
But they've departed from that ethic and they've turned it into this thing. Same thing with the military. There's a reason why guys like us are drawn to it. It's an archetype, like an archetype of people, like the warrior archetype. It's like, and these guys, these high level wizards, they produce an environment because they know people like us are out there that need that outlet, and they go, "We'll give it to you, motherfucker, and we'll use it to go make sure that the whole rest of the world uses our dollar as its reserve currency." Like it's a pretty interesting little fucking
absolutely.
If they understand Jungian archetypes, they can build reality tunnels to capture those archetypes.
Yeah.
Right.
And they do their we kind of have stepped back lately a little bit. We talk about this, and it's like at the meta level, when you see how people behave, right? And this is like, I don't like to think of other people this way, but like I know the control system thinks of people as cattle, right? And so when I observe people lately, I'm like, man, in a lot of respects, we do act like cattle. And then you start to kind of have a begrudging respect for this thing that the control system does, like the way that they do it. And it really is when the more you learn about it, and again, I would tear it down in a second. I don't respect it. I don't think it's good. I think it's evil, but I'm starting to have a begrudging like appreciation for how it works.
Well, you know, when it takes you fucking 9 months to do a psychological operations con op, which requires you to send one text, and it has to get fucking approved at like three levels above the chain of command.
Like, in our contract job, we were like low level evil wizards. Like we were doing some like psychological operations and deception stuff, and it's like what he's like saying in a way that people that aren't in it wouldn't understand. It's like how hard it was for us as like low level functionaries to get the approval and authority to do the stuff we wanted to do, and then to see them be able to just do this shit
in real time, change
like,
language, fucking
sure. So you know what's wild is you know, some of you guys' viewership out there might be familiar with the term worldview warfare.
It's new to me.
Yeah. So worldview warfare is like a more comprehensive type of psychological operation, but the term actually comes from the Germans. So the Germans they'd use a German term for it, like Weltanschauungskrieg. I don't speak German, so that's probably terrible. But it's their term. But I like the term worldview warfare because I see it as so much more comprehensive than just like a psychological operation, because it's an attack on your worldview, like the way that you see the world, the way that you see yourself, maybe your relationship with God, or, you know, depending on, you know, the person's belief systems, whatever they might be. And so I think that is absolutely what is happening right now is we're in, there's another term that I use. I don't know if anybody else has used it. If not, then I'm claiming it, but it's a deep war. So, you know, you hear about like deep state, deep politics, you know, stuff like that. So I think we're in a deep war. And so even when we think we're not at war, we are at war, because it's a deep war. And it's not just tanks and bombs and guns. It can be those things. Of course, it can be kinetic. Yes, of course. But you guys know warfare can also be done psychologically. Warfare can be done spiritually. Warfare can be done, you know, through a various different ways. And therefore, if you want to go deeper than bodily harm, you know, you can attack somebody's mind. Like, it's deeper than the physical body. You 100%. Go one step deeper, you know, and you're going into somebody's psyche, or you're going into somebody's spirit. If you want to get like, you know, theological about it, now you're going like as deep as you can go in this war. And we're constantly in this type of deep war all the time. And everyone's worldview to some degree is affected by just all this, just, you know, bullshit, like this kaleidoscope of bullshit that they put out there. You know, even if you're hip to it like us, you still have to like constantly sift through that. And then they give you heroes and they give you villains. You know, everybody's heard of like the Hegelian dialectic, right? Where, you know, they give you a concept or an idea or a group of people or a political party or whatever. And then they give you this one. And then through the interplay of those two in opposition with one another, something new is going to emerge from that. And that may have been what they intended all along, you know? And we have to realize, because here's what I think is coming now. This is where I think we got to be on our toes, right? So a lot of us, myself included, right now are clamoring for the truth to come out, whether it's about the COVID op, whether it's about Afghanistan, whether it's about the election, whether it's about whatever, you know, we want the truth to come out. What I fear is that they are going to allow the truth to come out as a pressure valve. And when it does, people are either going to lose their minds or they're going to lose faith in certain institutions. And then those institutions will almost be allowed to collapse as like new institutions are built up. And everyone's going to scream and cheer when in reality, that is them moving us into the next phase of control.
Man, you know? I think you're spot on with that. I think that natural law shit, right? But I think that the truth is actually irrepressible on a long enough continuum, right? And I think these guys know that.
Yes.
They know that the truth does come out. And this is what they always do with their limited hangouts, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, they're gonna tell you finally that, yeah, all right, the CIA did have something to do with Kennedy's assassination, right? And everybody goes, holy shit. Yeah, but don't worry about it. Those CIA guys, they're long gone. Those were bad CIA guys back in the 60s. Don't worry about it. But so they're gonna do, like you said, all this like truth about this stuff is irrepressible, and they're going to release it, but they're going to have complete control over it. They're going to be ready to harvest the bounce off that or whatever. And they're going to already have replacements for these institutions. It's going to suck because we're going to be clamoring for the institutions that are corrupted now, but that used to protect us are going to be torn down and replaced by something that's going to have different rules now. So it is a pretty dicey. Yeah, that's you're the first person I've heard call it out succinctly in that way, though. I'm gonna think about
So
that.
this is where I think people have to remember, even the truth can be weaponized against us because so what and this is like super nefarious, but these dudes, they're not incompetent. They're I think they mask themselves with incompetent people kind of around them. But the dudes at the center, I mean, they're one of you guys said, they're wizards. I mean, they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So like these guys can allow the truth to come out, and then whoever they use to feed us the truth, people are going to gravitate towards that person thinking that he's the hero because he's telling us the truth.
Yeah, it'll be Trump or Musk
whomever. Yeah, I mean, I can't believe the people like fall for it, but it's a limited hangout. So either they're giving you pieces of the truth, but not the whole truth, or they're giving you a lot of the truth, but it's too late.
Yes, that's it. It's too late.
But everyone will be like, oh, look, this guy is a true hero. He's fighting the deep state because he's telling us the truth,
Yep. And I don't know. It's hard to I don't know. It might be all the like space drugs or whatever, but like it's hard. I used to be very like pessimistic even before I knew all this stuff. I was way more like negative and pessimistic before I knew all this shit. Because in part of the process of learning all this stuff for me is like you said I like the worldview warfare thing. I had to really investigate like my worldview, and I had to change it because my existing worldview it was based on a bunch of fiction, right? But so like if it's hard to guess exactly what they're going to do in the future, but I have this feeling that if you really understand what you're about personally, it's like you got to answer some fundamental questions. You're like, okay, am I a created being or am I an accident of some explosion in the distant past? You got to confront that, and you got to come to, you have to answer. There's no more, agnosticism isn't going to get it anymore. You got to confront that. And I'm not saying you got to be one religion. I'm not even talking about religion. I'm just talking about fundamentally, like, am I a created being or am I an accident? If you're an accident, then it makes the rest of it kind of easy because then it's just, you're making pragmatic decisions that are based on your comfort. Okay. But if you believe that you're a created being, then you got to ask, am I here for some sort of purpose or what's going on? And then when you dig down into that, you're going to find that the answers to those questions that you answer for yourself about your purpose and stuff, they're going to be what guides you to whatever happens next. Like you're going to know what to do based on your fundamentals. And then it doesn't really matter. That's why, like, when I kind of started thinking of stuff that way, I still like to go down the rabbit holes and what's Klaus Schwab up to? Is NASA real? Did they really drive a dune buggy and hit golf balls up there? No, I don't think they did. But it doesn't fucking matter really, because it's about the fundamentals. It's like what he's always talking about. Like, hey, look, we're so serious about this shit. We quit, bought a farm. Yeah. And it's about reducing our dependency on these psychos and shit like that. Like, what do you think about for going forward? Like, how are you charting?
Yeah. So all those questions that you're talking about where you gotta figure out your kind of your cosmology or your big picture worldview. Like, what do you think about God or, the transcendent? Yeah. People got to ask themselves questions. They got to figure that out because that's going to determine what you then do in your life. And so, I will tell you that this is why I don't sit on the couch. This is why I did what I did. Obviously, you guys are the exact same way because at the end of the day, if our country collapses, and I don't know, maybe it will, maybe it won't, but if it does, it's not going to be because I sat on the couch. And I'm not saying Brad Miller's going to save the world. I'm just saying I'm one drop in the bucket of other people like you guys and other people, all of us doing our small part to try and, save this country and to some degree, save humanity. So I'm not saying that I'm this great person, but if this country collapses, it'll be in spite of what I did to try and keep that from happening, not because I went and sat on the couch and told myself, oh, there's nothing we can do. Yeah. Because to some degree, I'm not outcome dependent. I don't want to die. I mean, come on now. I don't want the country to collapse. I don't want us to starve to death. I don't want us all to end up in the gulag. But if we all die, then to me, because I do believe in God, and I do believe that requires me to be a man of action. And I think one of what they've done with men is they've put men on the couch, watching sports, eating nachos. You know what I'm saying? And it takes that masculine energy, but instead of doing it, you're watching somebody else do it on TV. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so, and they've done a masterful job of taking men and that masculine energy and kind of harnessing it off into something that doesn't threaten them, you know? So when I say I'm not outcome dependent, it's kind of like maybe we save the country, maybe we don't. I love my country. I'm a proud American. So of course I want us to fix this, but if we don't, you know, I am prepared to. I mean, I don't want to die. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah, but we're all gonna die.
I accept that it's not a foregone conclusion that we win during our lifetime. And even though I don't have kids, just kind of collectively, just you know, the generation that comes behind us, you know, I
Yep.
do care about that generation, even if I don't have biological children. And I think like, hey, listen, maybe we fix this in our lifetime, or maybe we don't. But I'm going to do everything that I can to just, you know, try and put my little drop in the bucket of doing my small part to do what I can, you know?
Amen to that, man.
Fucking A.
Well, we're an hour and 40. Do you have anything you want to put out? Any projects you're working on, or anywhere to send people's eyes?
Yeah. So a couple of things that I've mentioned tonight are things that I've written about. So if people want to find some of the stuff that I've written, I got a Substack that's fairly active that I try to write on. And
Oh, for sure.
so people can find that at my name. So just Brad Miller 10.substack.com. But I've got a piece there called Deep War that I wrote recently where I kind of, you know, work through that thought. I've got a couple pieces there where I kind of talk about like worldview and why I think they are perpetrating worldview warfare against us. So again, Brad Miller 10.substack.com. And then also
I'll put the
people can
link in
find
the description.
yeah, people can find me on Instagram. You know, you guys can put the link there, and then also on Twitter. I'm fairly active on Twitter too.
Oh
So
shit! I'm gonna get you on Twitter. I'm fairly active on Twitter as well.
yeah, you know, it's funny, but you guys will understand it. So I mean, I got out of the army, right, and then about 2 months after I got out of the army, do you guys know who you guys know the terminal CWO guys? You know,
Yeah. I don't know them, but I've seen their
yeah.
shit.
So anyway. So one of those guys, it's a group, it's more than one guy, but anyway, wrote a story about my exit from the army. And that's kind of how, you know, I don't want to say my story broke like I'm some sort of celebrity, but it got out there. But it was funny because the day that article got published, people were like, hey man, your shit's over here blowing up on Instagram. I'm like, Instagram? Or like, hey man, your story's over here blowing up on Twitter. So that day I joined both Twitter and Instagram. I thought Instagram was like for 16-year-old girls, man. So but it's not anymore. You know, everyone's
Right.
there. So
Yeah.
I never thought that, but hey, here's what I tell myself. We're in an information war. And so
Shit,
right.
to some
They're just
degree,
conduits. They're just conduits.
it is what it is. It is what it is. So yeah, I'm on Twitter, Instagram. Yeah, you guys can put the handles there and Substack.
yeah.
And I do try to write quite a bit on Substack.
Cool. I will definitely check that out.
Yeah, and that's where I found you out. So definitely on Instagram because you're dropping some spicy messages on there. I'm like, hell yeah, this dude's saying what I'm thinking. Let's fucking holler at this guy, man. And really,
Yeah. I had heard about you guys before that. So thanks for
really.
I had. So thanks for hollering at me. I appreciate that because this was a lot of fun. And I tell you,
Yes.
yeah, I do a fair amount of interviews or whatever, but and I enjoy all the interviews that I do, and I think they're all helpful, but it's a lot of fun for me to be able to talk with dudes who kind of know what's really going on, you know.
Yeah.
I can't talk about MK Ultra with everybody, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's cool to meet kindred spirits.
Yeah.
And it's good to let people hear us talk, to be honest, because a lot of people didn't serve in the military, so they think that they can't comment on it, they can't speak about it, and when they hear guys like us have these conversations, I do think it helps them. I mean,
it's a great point.
Yeah.
And I would say for the younger generation out there too, you know, for the guys who have that masculine energy and they wanted to go in the military to test themselves, there are other ways to serve your country now besides just going in the military, you know?
Yeah, sure.
And in fact, I would say there are better ways right now than going in the military.
Yeah.
know?
I agree.
Well, let's talk about it again in the future, man. Like we're the
All right, now.
40-year-olds. We should be shaping the fucking destiny of this country, not these octogenarians or whatever. So let's
Yeah.
This was fun.
Yeah.
Let's definitely.
All right, now. Yeah, fantastic.
All right.
I'd love to
Great
hang out
talking
with
to
you
you,
guys again and talk some more.
Cool deal, man.
Well, all right, we're gonna kill this real quick, then we'll wrap up.
All right, cool.
All right,
Take it easy, everybody. Love you out there.
Later.
All right, now.